Hello and welcome back to KXAN Plus. I'm your host, Esmeralda Zamora, and today we have two co-hosts in the room with me, and we have our meteorologist, Tommy House, and our chief meteorologist, Nick Bannin. How are you doing?
Esme, is it co-hosts if there's more than two? Like, is it three co-hosts or is it like a trifecta of hosts? Like, what is this?
It's a host.
Okay.
Three hosts.
Okay.
And Tommy here just came back from Llano working out on a story there. Tommy, how was the day in Llano?
It was good. It's sunny. It's warm. We're working on a story talking about the October 2018 floods out there. So that should be out early next week. Talk to some residents there. But overall, smooth drive, beautiful. You know what's crazy? Went by Cow Creek. A lot of work to be done there. The road's done. But that was the first time I've seen any sort of floods. Because we were all in studio during a lot of that July coverage, so crazy stuff out there. But it was a smooth trip.
Good. Well, good for you to see that firsthand. Looking forward to your story here next week. What we're talking about here today is some subtle changes to the winter outlook and the ENSO outlook. ENSO standing for El Nino Southern Oscillation, and it's this climate pattern based on the sea surface temperature anomaly in the eastern Pacific. And what that basically means is when it reaches a threshold of being cooler than normal by half a degree Celsius or more, then it becomes La Nina. And we're heading in that general direction. And the new update here over the last week, Tommy, was that La Nina is now expected to last all winter. Previous updates seemed to suggest it would begin in the fall and continue only into a little bit of winter, but now all winter. So it does look like we are heading into our second La Nina winter in a row.
And Nick, what is La Nina? What does that mean for our winter? What are we going to be feeling?
Yeah, so it usually means a specific type of weather pattern that gives us warmer and drier winters, but that's not always the case. This is the area of the ocean that we look at. And you could see some of those blues representing cooler than normal water there in the eastern equatorial Pacific. And we're still under a La Nina watch. This will turn into a La Nina advisory once we begin La Nina conditions. And that happens once the water temperature reaches that cooler than normal half a degree Celsius or colder below the typical average water temperature. And also when the atmosphere starts to react too. Because Tommy, you and I know that the temperatures of the water can be there, but if the atmosphere is not reacting, you're not really in a La Nina yet until you've got the water temperature change and the atmosphere starting to show the changes too. So we're not there yet.
A little bit of a two-part, but looking at some of these ENSO chances, you'll see that increase, right? Compared to the last time we did this, 3 weeks ago or something like that.
Yeah, it was just last month, I think, that we were talking about the potential for at least some of the winter to be in La Nina. So here are those chances that you mentioned. Maybe, Esme, we can bring these bars into full screen here just because they're a little tougher to see.
Let me take that banner off. There you go.
Otherwise, there we go. So let me start with the gray bars. Gray bars indicate the chances of ENSO neutral. That means you're in neither La Nina or El Nino. So you're not colder than normal, beyond that half degree centigrade, and you're not dealing with waters that are warmer than normal by a half degree centigrade or hotter, which would indicate El Nino. And ENSO neutral is what we've been in here for the last few months. This is what we headed into after last winter, which was another La Nina winter. So, and as we move the map along here, what you can see is the other side of things, which is the red bars indicating our odds for El Nino. And without jumping there and skipping over winter here, it is sort of interesting that during that 3-month season of AMJ, which is April, May, June, El Nino is actually favored over La Nina as we head to the end of next spring into next summer. So it could be foreshadowing potential El Nino conditions coming our way. But that's not the main topic of discussion today. The main topic for today is the fact that the odds of La Nina, yes, for DJF. So that's what matters here, is that for the full meteorological winter December, January, and February, the odds are now in firmly La Nina territory, with more than 50% odds there. So, Tommy, that's critical because now it means that we're not just going to be having a little bit of a fading La Nina into winter. It means that all of winter is expected to be La Nina. And then as we come out of winter into early spring, that's when we start seeing a return to ENSO neutral again.
You know, obviously months away, but I'm curious a month ago if that El Nino had as much of a bump this far out compared to where we're looking at it right now. You know what I mean with that April, May, June. I know it's really far away and we still have the fall and winter to go through, but interesting sign there.
And ENSO neutral still favored during next spring.
Of course.
So still and favored by a long shot, but interesting to see El Nino over La Nina for next spring. It's been a while since we've had El Nino favoring instead of La Nina, even though ENSO neutral is by far the favorite there. But this should set us up for an interesting fall and potentially interesting winter. Of course, we got to go through fall first, and you love talking about the tropics here. And La Nina with the tail end of our Atlantic hurricane season does typically bring more active weather for us in the Atlantic. We're starting to see more storms forming. In fact, Gabrielle formed today in the Atlantic, not expected to impact the United States, at least in the near term. But it is a sign of potentially this transition into La Nina, which is usually fairly favorable for the development of more storms in the Atlantic.
You know, obviously a few more weeks left on the tropics. Some of those invests in Gabrielle, potential Gabrielle, the track of Gabrielle, of course, as of now, ensembles are curving it away. And we know in the fall, too, we get a lot more dips in the jet stream, a lot more fronts and troughs that could steer some storms away. Climatologically, the East Coast in late September, October, November, not really the biggest pinpoint target, but you know what is? The Gulf, Northwest Caribbean, it's a bath, something we're going to have to watch closely here anywhere in the Gulf and the Caribbean, because still until the end of November, we have to be, monitoring the tropics, as they say.
Yeah, you mentioned the Gulf being a bath, the water temperatures, and I can just go back to our sea surface anomaly map here. The darker the reds, the warmer the water. And parts of the Gulf way warmer than normal, bordering on being record warm in some areas last time I checked. So this would favor tropical development should a storm enter the Gulf, and of course that is key. But once we get past La Nina here, and in fact we can take this map full, because there, as we head into the fall months, we're technically now in meteorological fall. And as we see La Nina developing here, probably in the next 2 months or so, that typically does lead to more hurricanes in the Caribbean and the Atlantic and possibly the Gulf due to weaker vertical wind shear and trade winds and less atmospheric stability, which means more instability. So conditions that would be more favorable for keeping storms alive rather than the wind shear that could tear them apart. So it has not been that busy of a season so far, despite the multiple forecasts that had suggested quite a bit of an above average season, although not record breaking. But it could be that as the wind shear relaxes a little bit toward the tail end here of the Atlantic hurricane season, that we could start seeing more storms really week after week in the Atlantic.
Yeah. Where were you is still in the New England area for Sandy?
Yes.
Yeah. Man, I was in the Boston area. This was for context, y'all, this was a post-tropical storm. It was I believe a category 1 right before landfall, made landfall in New Jersey, but New York, New England, up toward Maine even saw some impacts, flooding. On the back end of it, we saw feet of snow in West Virginia. Was unique. So needless to say, a few more weeks of the tropic season, definitely.
Yeah, and certainly don't count out the intensity of those late season storms. They can be very potent. That one ended up being named Superstorm Sandy.
Yeah.
And then the National Hurricane Center have changed some of the ways that they do warnings, because it wasn't expected to be a tropical system when it moved inland. So it meant that they couldn't do some warnings that they felt in retrospect that maybe they should have. So Superstorm Sandy did eventually end up changing the way that the National Hurricane Center does their warnings. So beyond the tropics and beyond some of the active weather that we could have in the Atlantic and potentially the Gulf in the fall, then we start talking about winter. And this is what a typical La Nina pattern looks like in the winter in North America. The polar jet stream pushed farther to the north, that's the storm track. That's the farther away from us it is, the fewer storms generally drop into central Texas, and the general result of that is drier than normal and warmer than normal, but not for the entire U.S. Some areas get different weather from that.
Yeah, I was looking, the biggest thing was places like Tennessee and Kentucky, clash into the air mass, some big severe weather there. But, it only takes one or two big dips in the jet stream to bring some cold temperatures here that could really put a dent in our monthly average temps, but overall climatologically drier and warmer. But something to watch. As we saw, looking at those probabilities, it's not a standout, completely La Nina, still expected to be La Nina, trending much more toward La Nina. But, even compared to a month ago, more favor in this new pattern that we're going to be seeing unfold for us, but something to monitor this winter.
Yeah, and what's interesting is even if our winters can be warmer than normal and drier than normal overall, it doesn't mean that you don't get wintry weather or Arctic cold, because what happens is a lot of this colder air locked up in the northern tier states here in the U.S. can still get brought down occasionally with some of the more potent fronts. So because that colder air is here, while most of the time we may stay warmer than normal, we can still get more intrusions of cold from time to time. And in fact, we got that last winter. December was record warm, and then January into February, we got several of those Arctic blasts, and we even got an inch of snow in January. And on this blog on KXAN.com, I actually linked to some of the snow pictures. I was looking back on it, remembering, oh yeah, I was sledding down a little hill with my kids one of those mornings there in January because of the occasional bursts of some of that pretty cold air that can still drop down even if the overall pattern is usually warmer and drier than normal.
I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah,
big fan of the snow. As long as it's not power outage or icy, get a little fluff.
Yeah.
Huge fan.
Yeah, and I don't remember that we had much in the way of power outages with that 1 inch. It mostly accumulated on the colder surfaces, the grass, the sidewalks, less so the streets. So it wasn't a disastrous one. Let's talk about what is normal for winter here in Central Texas. So let's look at what's normal first, and bear in mind as we look at this that a typical La Nina winter is warmer than normal and drier than normal. So warmer than this, and then I'll show you what the rainfall looks like. And you can see where the average temperatures lie. We drop down into the mid-60s for average highs in Austin in December. 63 in January makes it our coldest month of the year. And then February is a month that is almost like two seasons in one. You get winter-like weather for the first couple of weeks of February, and then you really start to see those average temperatures warming quickly as our days are getting longer toward the back half of the month. So we're warming fairly quickly by the end of the month, 67 being the average high there in February.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say. I mean, the winter, I was just looking at that November high, and I was like, we're still averaging in the low 90s right now. We've seen triple digits last October. Of course, that was record breaking, but still. And then how did we go in the matter of 8 weeks to a normal high of 65? I mean, it
seems like we've got a long way to go to cool down to this.
Yeah.
Here's how the rainfall looks for winter. Winter is our driest season here in Central Texas. December, 2.72 inches of rain. January, 2.64. And then February, just 1.89 inches of rain. February being our driest month of the year. But interestingly, February is the only month of the whole year that actually averages snow. Now it's, I think, like 0.2 of an inch or something like that. We'll take it. But it is the only month that averages some measurable snow. All the other months average less than that, and not even notable amounts. But remember when we talked about La Nina being what is usually warmer than normal and drier than normal. That was not the case last winter we had a weak La Nina, although it acted more like a moderate one. And it wasn't warmer than normal and drier than normal. It was colder than normal, but drier than normal. So we got a little bit of a split there as far as the La Nina goes. From a rainfall perspective, it acted like a La Nina winter. The storm track was generally north of us.
Yeah.
When it did drop in, it didn't drop considerable precipitation. It was more light than heavy. So we got way less rain than normal, almost 2.5 inches less rain than a typical winter, which is already a dry season for us. But despite that record warm December, January and February were so cold that they were able to overcome what was a very, very warm December and actually make it overall slightly cooler than normal for the season as a whole, which usually in a La Nina winter is warmer than normal.
You know, one of the reasons why I think this actually happened with those cooler temps when you have the nighttime and there's not a lot of clouds. Clouds act like a blanket and sort of insulate and keep some of that warm air around that's trying to leave the surface. So when it's clear, it gets really cold. We had plenty of those cold advisories and cold and wind chills and things like that. So I think those overnight lows, kind of similar to how this past July, our high temps were cooler, our lows were warmer. The summer still ended warmer, even though we had a lot of days that weren't at that triple digit mark.
Yeah, and if we think about last winter too, we had fairly widespread drought, and we had dry ground. We didn't get a lot of rain, and when your ground is drier and the air is drier, you're able to cool off more at night. And that was part of it too. So yeah, I think you were onto something there. In fact, when we look at the number of freezes that we had last winter, that was more than normal, despite the fact that our first freeze wasn't until January. It was I think it was the second latest first freeze in Austin area history.
Wow.
So we had a very late first freeze, yet we were able to get more freezes than normal because that dry ground, the clear night, we had a couple of those more Arctic air masses drop in that helped to reinforce some of the chill later in January and into early February. And those freezes eventually really caught up and then surpassed what is a typical winter for us with 16 compared to 12.
We should do a prediction. Not now.
No.
A freeze prediction, maybe.
Hey, well,
give it a few weeks.
How many would you pick? 50?
Oh man, I don't even know. I'm gonna take the. I want to say higher. We'll do 12 or 13 for now. We'll have to wait and see though.
Yeah, I'm sure we will be putting together some sort of winter forecast here over the coming months to give us a heads up about that. But yeah, interesting that the winter ended up with more freezes than normal. In fact, more of our winters over the last 5 years have had more freezes than normal compared to less. And that's because more of our winters over the last several winters have been La Nina winters and not El Nino ones. So it just goes to show you that while, yes, many La Nina winters can be warmer than normal, you can still get more of these rounds of cold like this. So some really interesting dichotomy there.
So a chance for 16 freezes this winter?
Yeah, it's a good possibility. I wouldn't be surprised. I would sort of lean toward 14 if I were to guess now. But
Put you on the spot there.
Yeah, you know. Esme loves it when we really give that first warning, like so far ahead of time.
She's sticking it to us from that triple digit outlook.
I
That's
want to
her way
know
of
when
payback.
the first freeze is going to happen.
I will say we can probably, obviously, we have to put together a forecast for this. Higher confidence, it will be drier. And the trend right now is super dry through this month, just 800ths of an inch of rain. So we're going to, October is the second wettest month climatologically. Hopefully we can get some non-flooding good rain before we dry out this winter.
Yeah, because that could actually make an impact on how dry the ground is and how cool our nights can be if we can get some good rain to wrap up the fall season. And interestingly, it's like dominoes in a way, because if you have a super dry winter and you don't get a lot of rain in the spring, that could actually set you up for a hotter than normal summer. So the seasons, while from a weather pattern perspective, don't necessarily tie in, the drier the ground or the wetter the ground can have an impact on what the temperatures do in the season after and the season after that. And it could lay the groundwork for more more difficult drought conditions next year if we don't get much rain in winter. Now, we don't usually get much rain in winter, but if we get even less than we should, then it can make things interesting depending on what happens in the spring, because being dry going into spring. And if spring underperforms, then you would expect that next summer could be hot. So it all builds on each other.
And we're expecting a few showers here this week, right? Or into next week?
Yeah, just a few spotty showers here the next couple of days or so. I've got just 10% rain chances tomorrow. Those rain chances on Friday are not 0, but they're less than 10%. And then they're back to 10% Saturday, Sunday. So yeah, not worth canceling your plans around. But things do look a bit wetter here Monday and especially Tuesday, with those rain chances dropping off now into Wednesday. And at the same time, temperatures pretty steady here through the weekend in the mid-90s, and then those numbers start to come down as we head into early next week, and that ties into the extra clouds and some of the wet weather around, Tommy.
Big fan of that. You see some of those. I thought my eyesight's so bad. I thought that was in the 80s by midweek. I was like 81. No,
96.
Some of our models hinting at upper 80s on Wednesday.
Some clouds and cooler air.
I was leaning on the more conservative side of 91, which still ends up being right around average for this time of year, but at least it's a temperature drop. So we've got that to look forward to at least. It's bad when we're cheering on average temperatures.
Yeah, right, exactly. Let me tell you a story. Monday, right? Finally get a chance to go to the pool. Heading over to the pool, and that 10% rain chance I had Sunday night, see a cloud, and I'm like, keep your distance, all right, buddy? Like, we're trying to get to the water. I'm putting on sunscreen. Get there, it starts raining right on us.
Wow.
It was fun, though, but yeah.
Most people, it rains as soon as they get a car wash. But for you, it's as soon as you put your swimsuit on.
Your sunscreen on.
Yeah, Weather Center's going to want me to be suit and then bathing suit
all right.
pants.
Tommy's going to be wearing a swimsuit every day of the winter. That's what's going to happen.
Well, October is supposed to be a pretty wet month, right? Do we expect that to be our October this year?
So that we'll be able to dive into that next week. We should get our October outlook here within the next couple of days, maybe even as early as tomorrow. So you're foreshadowing our discussion next week will be the October forecast, Esme. So you got to stay tuned and sit tight for that one. But on KXAN.com right now, we've got our weather blog diving into La Niña, everything that we typically see in a La Niña winter, which is by no means something that we see every La Niña winter. They're all treated differently from one to the next. But at least the odds of a La Niña winter have gone above 50% now that we can say that for the first time this year, a La Niña winter is now being forecast for the entire winter. That was the big update here over the last week. So on KXAN.com, under the Weather and Traffic tab, then click on Weather Blog. There's that snowman I told you about.
That's a cute little pecan-eyed snowman.
Yeah, and that was from last January. That was from the storm that brought us an inch of snow. Of course, it melted by the afternoon, but we had it in the morning. So I wanted to prove that indeed we had it by throwing up the picture there.
And there's a link to the coverage or some more photos.
Yeah, some more photos there too. If you're wanting a little bit of a cooler flashback on a warmer than normal day, KXAN.com there's also a First Warning Weather University lesson where we dive into La Niña, and I'm sure we'll be talking about La Niña more over the coming weeks and months as our winter forecast seems to revolve around that. And then next week, join us as we talk about the October forecast.
And hopefully there's a lot of rain in that forecast.
Let's hope. We need some. Yeah.
For anyone who's interested in learning about weather patterns versus climate, me and Kristen spoke about that this morning, and I think it was very, very informative for anyone who just doesn't know how we get those October outlooks and what goes into predicting all of that, right?
Very good. Yes, I know those Kristen's classrooms lessons that she does here once a week. Super informative for kids of all ages and adults of all ages too.
Yeah, and adults.
Yeah.
Well, before we leave, where can we watch you all right after this stream?
So at 4 o'clock, meteorologist Freddie Vela is going to have that newscast updating you on these tiny little rain chances here this week before a wetter pattern next week. I'll be on at 5, 6, 9, and 10. Tommy will be on tomorrow morning, right, Tommy?
5:30 I arrive. I'll be on from 7 to 9 on CW, and then KXAN from 11 to 1. And whole team's working hard, even though the weather's a little quiet now. Could get interesting in the next few days.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, let's see what happens in the next few days. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all on air or next week.